When I think back on that relationship, I realize just how much I overlooked, how much I excused, and how badly I wanted something that just wasn't meant to last. I had been 24 when I met her. She was 22. I wasn't exactly the most experienced in relationships. My last one had been about a year long, and while it ended on relatively decent terms, it had left me drained. That girl had been struggling with depression, and I cared for her deeply, but I couldn't carry both of our emotional burdens at once. As much as it hurt, I knew it was unsustainable. So when I met this new girl, I was vulnerable, open, and honestly eager to find someone who made life feel lighter. We lived in the same apartment complex. At first, we only spoke casually, passing interactions, the kind you don't think much of. But then she asked me for a ride somewhere, and that simple request turned into the start of something more. Before long, we were spending a lot of time together. I'd visit her at the sandwich shop she worked at, keeping her company until closing time. We could sit around for hours just talking, and I started to believe she was someone I could build something real with. She had her own baggage, though. She was on a break from school, battling depression, and had already gone through a broken engagement. She'd transferred universities a couple of times, but as far as I know, never actually finished. One of the first ways we bonded was over her story of being cheated on and betrayed by her ex. Back then, I believed every word. Now, I'm not so sure. We fell into a rhythm. It wasn't long before we were practically inseparable. About 2 months into this situationship, she introduced me to her parents, even though at that point we were just friends with benefits. That introduction meant something to me, and naturally, I wanted to take things further. I wasn't interested in anyone else. She was the only girl I wanted. So, I asked her to officially be my girlfriend. She turned me down. Her excuse? She wasn't ready because of what she'd gone through with her ex-fiancé. That should have been my first warning sign. But I gave her grace, chalked it up to her healing process, and told myself it was fine. We kept seeing each other exclusively. I didn't talk to other women, and she didn't date other men. But still, she refused to call me her boyfriend. There were good times. For stretches, it really felt like we clicked. She mirrored my interests, claimed she wanted similar things in life, and acted like we were a perfect fit. But there were cracks in that image. She would sometimes make little jabs, backhanded remarks that stuck with me. Other times, she'd compare me to her exes, which I hated. When we fought, it was often over something small, but she had a way of blowing things out of proportion. If I tried to calm the situation down, she'd storm out of my apartment. When I chased after her, she accused me of not giving her space. But when I stopped chasing, she flipped it. Suddenly, I didn't care enough to go after her. I could never win. Looking back, I realized she was gaslighting me. At the time, I didn't even know what gaslighting was. I just knew that sometimes she'd twist things I clearly remembered her saying, making me question myself. But I brushed it off because I was in love. My friends weren't blind to any of this. They tell me I deserved better, that she didn't treat me right. I ignored them. I thought I knew her better than anyone, and that they just didn't see the side of her I did. But the truth is, they were looking out for me. People, listen to your friends when they all tell you the same thing. After a full year of this, I was still asking her to make it official. She kept saying no, but at the same time, she called me the best guy she'd ever dated. She let her family know about me, but strangely, she kept me a secret from most of the outside world. Her friends knew I existed, but I never felt welcome in their circle. They were cliquey, judgmental, and on top of that, they had a cat, which gave me the perfect excuse to avoid them since I'm allergic. Despite our problems, we had moments where we felt close. She'd call me every night, and we'd stay on the phone until one of us fell asleep. She said my voice helped her rest because of her depression. But then there were darker moments too, times when she thought it was funny to slap me hard across the face. Not during fights, just randomly like it was some sort of joke. Both times I told her that wasn't acceptable, that respect goes both ways. I would never lay a hand on her, and I expected the same courtesy. Then there were the cruel things she'd say during arguments. Once, she threw it in my face that my roommate knew plenty of guys in the complex who'd be happy to hook up with her without strings attached. She said it as if I was replaceable. That cut deep. Eventually, after more than a year of waiting, she finally agreed to make it official. I thought I'd finally gotten what I wanted, but something still felt off. She didn't exactly parade me around, and it seemed like she was keeping parts of our relationship hidden. I pushed that thought aside, telling myself I had what mattered, that she was mine. I'm not going to pretend I was perfect either. I had my own struggles with depression, and between work, school, and the chaos of our relationship, I wasn't always the best version of myself. Sometimes I snapped. Sometimes I brought up all the ways she had hurt me, throwing it back in her face. We broke up several times over the years, sometimes because I ended it, sometimes because she did. But every time, one of us would crawl back, and the cycle would start again. I'm not proud of everything I did, either. At one point, I even hurt myself to show her how much I was in pain, a manipulative move, if I'm being honest. But that idea didn't come out of nowhere. She had done it too, telling me she was suicidal more than once. That environment became normal for us, as messed up as it was. Through it all, though, I loved her. I believed her when she said she loved me too. We even talked about marriage. And yet, in the end, after everything, she cheated. And I didn't find out until 3 months later, when she was engaged to someone else. But here's the thing, I don't feel like I lost. She may have thought she pulled one over on me, but I got the last laugh. I met her when I was in my mid-20s, and for a while, I believed she was the person I was meant to spend the rest of my life with. We talked about our future, where we'd live, what our children might be like. But during that time, she moved twice. First into an apartment only a few minutes away, and later back to her parents' house an hour north. When she lived in the apartment down the street, she threw a party. At the end of the night, when everyone else left without helping, I was the one who stayed to clean up. She smiled at me and said this was proof I'd make a good husband. I took her words to heart, thinking it was a glimpse of our future. Once she moved back in with her parents, I visited almost every week. Slowly, I noticed something was changing. She was slower to reply to my texts and calls, sometimes ignoring them altogether. But if she reached out, she expected me to respond right away. No matter the time, even at 1 a.m. when I had work or school early the next day, I'd show up for her without hesitation. After a couple of months, I started suggesting that we should take the next step and get engaged. Instead of being excited, she started retreating, using her past depression as a reason she wasn't ready. Then one day, she asked if we could go back to casually dating. Against my better judgment, I agreed. I thought giving her what she wanted would prove that I was the right man for her. What followed was confusing and painful. She went on dates with other people and would tell me about them, only to add how much better I was than those guys. Meanwhile, I stayed loyal, refusing to see anyone else because I was still in love with her. I told her that if she ever found someone she truly wanted, I'd step aside and let her go. Eventually, after conversations with my friends and family, I realized the truth. I was giving everything while she wasn't even committed to me anymore. I told her we needed to stop being physical until we were officially together again, and she agreed. But that didn't last. She would pressure me into crossing boundaries, then afterward accuse me, saying I should have stopped her. It was a cycle of guilt and manipulation that left me feeling worthless. The lowest point was when she told me that if she ever got pregnant, she wouldn't tell me. She said she alone would decide what to do. That broke me, because being a father had always been something I wanted, and I knew I'd never abandon my children. Even through the fights and the hurt, we would still fall back into making up. We'd talk about marriage, children, and what our life might look like. She'd see a mixed-race baby, me being Latino and her being white, and say it looked like what our child could be. When she felt low, she'd ask, "Would you still marry me?" And I'd always answer yes, because I thought love meant staying no matter what. But things shifted during Christmas. I went to Florida to visit my brother, and while I was away, she barely responded to my messages. At night, when we usually talked on the phone, she wouldn't answer. Once, she did call, only to ask if I had a certain DVD, saying she wanted to watch it with her family. Something about it felt wrong, like she wasn't being honest with me. When I came back for the new semester, she came to my university supposedly because she lost her Fitbit. I helped her look, and though we spent some time together, it felt different. She asked me to come to her parents' house in 2 days because she had something important to tell me. I already knew what was coming. I braced myself by talking to friends, preparing for the worst. That night, I drove to her house at 10 p.m. She came out and sat in my car. For nearly an hour, we talked. She finally told me she didn't want to date me anymore. I said I already felt her pulling away and asked if there was someone else. She denied it, saying she just didn't think we were right for each other. But then she started saying things that cut deep. She said she had never truly thought of me as husband material, that she never pictured us married or raising kids together, that she had always known this from the beginning. And then she admitted something that stung the most. She didn't want her kids to look like me. Because she was white and I was Latino, she said she wanted her children to resemble her. The irony is that now she presents herself as someone progressive and non-racist. I was stunned. I thought back to all the times she had asked if I would marry her, all the times she talked about our future children, all the dreams we discussed. None of it had been real for her. It felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me. I told her I loved her, but I agreed it was over. We said we wouldn't contact each other anymore. She insisted on blocking me on Facebook, claiming she didn't trust me to keep her blocked if I did it first. We didn't block each other on our phones, though, just in case of emergencies. Driving away, I felt heavy with sadness, but at the same time, I couldn't ignore a sense of relief, like a crushing weight had finally been lifted. The following month was rough. Nights were the hardest. I realized she had made me codependent, constantly shaping my happiness around her approval. But for the first time in a long time, I also felt like maybe, just maybe, I had a chance to start rebuilding myself, that I had gotten used to her nightly phone calls. They had become such a regular part of my life that when they stopped, I felt an emptiness I couldn't shake. Many nights I found myself curled up on the floor of my room, crying until I could barely breathe. But instead of letting the grief consume me completely, I forced myself into my work, my classes, and time with my friends. It was the only way I could keep from falling apart. About a month later, I was woken up by a call from her early in the morning. My first thought was that something urgent must have happened, but when I answered, it didn't seem that way. It sounded like she had accidentally dialed me. That in itself didn't make sense. After a month of silence, what were the odds she'd randomly call me by mistake? I could hear her voice, faintly in the background, and there was also a man's voice I didn't recognize. They were talking about something, snow, I think, and I'm almost sure I heard my own name mentioned. Then the call suddenly disconnected, leaving me staring at my phone in confusion. I know I shouldn't have, but I reached out to a few mutual friends. They told me she had started dating someone new. Against my better judgment, I decided to contact her. When I asked if she was okay, she didn't answer right away. It took her a few days, but then she admitted that yes, she had but dialed me. She also said she'd been meaning to reach out, that she missed my friendship. For a brief moment, it felt like old times again. Eventually, she told me she was seeing someone new. I told her I already knew, and that I'd heard it from friends. I even mentioned that I had seen a picture of the guy. That's when she started talking about him, focusing more on his flaws than anything else. I just listened, though inside I was starting to feel uneasy. At one point, she made a remark about his hair being strange, and I agreed. But apparently she had been referring to his hair from years ago, not now. Suddenly, she became suspicious, asking how I knew what his hair had looked like back then. I quickly backtracked, saying I thought she meant his current hairstyle. The conversation took a strange turn after that. She then told me she'd been receiving random friend requests on Facebook and asked if it was me behind them. I told her it wasn't. Not long after, the conversation ended. I was left with this heavy, uneasy feeling. On one hand, part of me was happy she had reached out, but the more I thought about it, the more I realized it wasn't healthy for me. I didn't want to get tangled up in her world again. The next day I messaged her and said that while it had been nice to talk like we once did, it was best if we didn't stay in contact. She agreed. I blocked her number and tried to move forward. A week later, while walking on campus, I noticed I had a new voicemail, even though my phone had never rung. It was from her, asking if I was home. Apparently, she had come by my place to drop some of my things off. No one was there at the time, so she just left them at my door. The gesture infuriated me. I had already told her I wanted no contact, yet she had ignored that boundary completely. That night I sat down and wrote her an email. I told her that I had loved her deeply, but that she had lied to me, hurt me, and mistreated me in more ways than I could count. I thanked her parents for always treating me with kindness, because despite everything, we had shared a good relationship. I explained that from this point forward, I wanted zero contact of any kind. I told her she was blocked from my phone, and while we lived an hour apart, it was still possible we might run into each other due to mutual friends. I wrote that however she chose to treat me in the future would be how I treated her. If she treated me like a friend, I'd act like a friend. If she treated me like I didn't exist, I'd return the same energy. And if she treated me like an enemy, I'd treat her the same way. I hit send and assumed that would be the end of it. I couldn't have been more wrong. A few days later, I received a reply, but not from her. From her father. This man was an ex-Marine and a practicing lawyer. His email blindsided me. He ordered me to stay away from his daughter and accused me of stalking her. He claimed I had created fake Facebook accounts to follow her online, which wasn't true. Sure, I'd glanced at her profile from a friend's account a couple of times, but that was the extent of it. Who hasn't? He even pulled out a section from my email, the part about me treating her the way she treated me, and said he considered it a threat. He went on to say that if I didn't back off, he would pursue a restraining order against me. I was stunned. Her father and I had always been on good terms, and now he was coming at me like this? I couldn't believe it. After discussing it with some friends, and drawing on what I had learned from my law studies, I decided to respond. In my reply, I made it clear. I wanted nothing to do with his daughter. I pointed out that she had been the one to reach out to me, not the other way around. In fact, she had even shown up at my house just the week before. If I was such a supposed stalker, why would she risk coming to my home unannounced? I told him plainly that his accusations were baseless, and no judge would ever grant a restraining order over something like this. Finally, I told him that he and his daughter were never to contact me again, and I would do the same. After I sent that response, I sat there wondering what in the world was happening. What kinds of stories had she been telling her family and friends about me? The whole situation left me shaken and confused, as if I'd been painted as someone I wasn't. I told some of my friends about everything that had happened, and they were just as shocked as I was. They told me straight up that I had dodged a bomb, that I should be grateful things ended the way they did. I thought that would be the end of the story. But like most things in life, it wasn't that simple. This was a cheating story after all, and cheating stories rarely end cleanly. We broke up in January. Just a little over 3 months later, during the first week of April, a friend of mine sent me a message while I was at work. He told me my ex had just announced her engagement. I couldn't believe it. It had only been 3 months since we split. This was the same woman who had gone on and on about how hard relationships were for her because of her cheating, abusive ex-fiancé. And now she was engaged again already? It didn't add up. What really got me was when my friend told me about a comment under her engagement post. Someone had congratulated her and mentioned how happy they would have helped her and this guy get together back in November. November. The same November when she and I were still dating. Sure, technically we weren't fully exclusive at that point, but I had given her so many chances to come clean if she was seeing someone else. She lied every single time. To me, that was still cheating. I was furious. And suddenly, all the pieces fit together. That was why she had started pulling away around Christmas. That was why she didn't want to watch movies with me. She already had someone else lined up. It hurt, but I forced myself to move forward. I was still battling depression and heavy trust issues, so I leaned on my friends and people at church, talking it through. The more I opened up, the more I learned about her from people who had known her but didn't realize we had dated. And what I heard wasn't flattering. They shared things about her I probably shouldn't have been told, but they opened my eyes. I learned how she spoke poorly about others behind their backs, how she manipulated people. That's when it finally hit me. She never actually cared about me. She just wanted someone to care for her until she found someone she thought was better. I realized the only reason I fell in love with her was because she pretended to be someone she wasn't. She had studied me, figured out I was kind-hearted and empathetic, and simply reflected my own traits back at me. I thought I had found someone like me, when in reality I had been dating a narcissist. That realization changed me. I understood that I loved too deeply, cared too much, and needed to be more cautious about who I gave my heart to. It was a painful lesson, but one I needed. 6 months went by. I didn't run into her, though I heard she had moved back to my city with her new husband. So much for all the time she had accused me of being a stalker. Some of my friends ran into her, though, and one of them embarrassed her by making a crude joke about something she had done in the past. Not long after, I got invited to a friend's wedding. I couldn't attend the ceremony itself, but I made it to the reception. While there, I finished writing a short speech poking fun at my friend. The guy had a laugh so loud and annoying it deserved a roast. I wrapped up my remarks and was about to sit down when another mutual friend walked in, and right behind her, there she was. My ex. With her husband. Our eyes met instantly. The moment she saw me, instead of continuing into the room, she stopped, shoved her husband back into the hallway, and hurried after him, out of sight. I just stood there stunned. After a moment, I slipped out the other side of the building to collect myself. Honestly, I was fine. More surprised than hurt. After a few minutes, I went back in and noticed they hadn't returned. I asked my buddy if he had invited her. He said yes, but claimed it didn't cross his mind to give me a warning since they weren't that close. He was more of a friend type. Whatever. I let it go. A little later, when it was time for the newlyweds' first dance, we all moved some chairs around. I happened to be standing by a side door when my ex walked in. The second she realized I was standing right there, she grabbed her husband and bolted across the room, dragging him behind her like dead weight. After that, she avoided me the entire night. And here's the thing. In that moment, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Wholeness. For so long after the breakup, I had felt broken, incomplete, like I was missing part of myself. But watching her run from me, watching how ashamed and uncomfortable she was just being in the same room, I felt my power return. I felt happy. Really happy. For the first time in a long time. It didn't matter that she was married and I was single. I had won the breakup. She couldn't even look me in the eye. I, on the other hand, felt no shame, no guilt. My conscience was clear. Now here I am, over 4 years later, still single but genuinely happy. And if you're reading this, Maddie, yes, you should know that I finished university. I'm building a life for myself. You, after all your big talk about changing the world, ended up just being a housewife. The only things you're ever going to change are dirty diapers. And deep down, you'll always know what you really are, a liar and a cheater. Applause. Music.